My name is Marianne Thorne, and I am 75 years old. For most of my life, I have lived by the sea, in a small cottage in Port Blossom where the air smells of salt and roses, and the foghorn on the point sounds a mournful, steady rhythm that has become the metronome of my days. I was not expecting a parade or a string quartet for my birthday. All I had hoped for was a quiet dinner at my son's new house, a simple meal, a comfortable chair, and the soft hum of conversation with the family I had dedicated a lifetime to nurturing. I had just smoothed the folds of the sea green dress I saved for such occasions. It was not a glamorous garment, but it was elegant, respectable, the kind of dress that Camilla, my daughter-in-law, might find acceptable, if not quite up to her exacting standards. A glance at the grandfather clock in the hall told me it was 6:15. Dinner was set for 7. My phone, resting on the polished surface of the side table, buzzed with a soft vibration. I reached for my reading glasses, assuming it was Julian with a last-minute query about the lemon meringue pie I'd baked. But the message I read was not about dessert. It was from Julian, yes, but the words were stark, stripped of all warmth. They felt like stones thrown from a distance. Change of plans for tonight. Camilla thinks it's better if it's just us. We'll see you another time. Just like that. 16 words. Not a phone call, where a voice might betray a hint of apology or regret. Not a conversation. A text message as impersonal as a cancellation notice from the dentist. For a long, silent moment, I was certain it was a mistake. A poorly worded joke, perhaps? Or maybe the message was intended for someone else, a friend he was uninviting from a different gathering. But no, it was his number. The clipped, efficient tone had Camilla's influence all over it, but the cowardice was pure Julian. I sank onto the chintz armchair, the phone feeling heavy and cold in my palm. My heart wasn't breaking in the dramatic, shattering way of novels. It was a quieter, more insidious process, like a fine wool sweater unraveling one thread at a time. A slideshow of memories flickered behind my eyes. Julian as a small boy with scraped knees, his face buried in my lap, convinced the world had ended. Julian at 16, nervously practicing his bow tie in the mirror before his first school dance. Julian, a proud new father, placing his infant daughter, Sophie, into my arms, his eyes shining with a wonder I thought would last forever. And now this. Julian, a man in his late 40s, deferring to his wife's whims and informing his own mother she was no longer welcome at his birthday table. I stared at the wall, at the framed photograph of my late husband, William. He was smiling, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He had always been the anchor, the one who saw the world with unshakable clarity. I could almost hear his voice, a low and gentle rumble. Marianne, my love, you can give them your heart, but don't let them misplace it. That was the moment the tide inside me, which had been receding for years, finally turned. After all the compromises, all the quiet sacrifices, all the checks written and bills paid, perhaps it was time to stop anchoring my life to a shore where I was no longer welcome. The cottage was silent, the only sound the distant cry of a gull. I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate, and walked to the old oak secretary desk that had been my father's. In the bottom drawer, beneath stacks of old letters and photographs, was a collection of meticulously organized files. Every folder was neatly labeled, every receipt and bank statement filed in chronological order. I pulled out the thickest one, a worn manila folder with a single word on the tab, Julian. Inside was the documented history of my generosity, which I now saw with painful clarity was a history of their dependence. There was the cashier's check for $40,000 to help Julian launch his consulting firm, a venture that dissolved in less than 18 months. There were the tuition receipts for Camilla's interior design certification, a passion she pursued with great enthusiasm until it was time to actually find clients. There were bank transfers for a new slate roof, for the down payment on their gleaming black SUV, for the sleek, minimalist kitchen renovation Camilla had declared was an absolute necessity for their mental well-being. Each piece of paper was a testament not to my love, but to their expectation. My savings account had become their emergency fund, my pension their discretionary income. My name, I realized with a hollow ache, was the invisible foundation upon which their beautiful, curated life was built. 6 months ago, Julian had called me, his voice brimming with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. They'd found their dream home, he'd said, a stunning contemporary house in a new development called Seaview Crest, with panoramic windows that looked out over the choppy gray expanse of the Atlantic. It would be a place for the whole family, he'd promised. "Mom, you'll have your own lovely view from the guest room," he'd said. "It'll be like you're always with us." That guest room, it seemed, did not come with a seat at the dinner table. On my kitchen counter, tucked beside the fruit bowl, was the glossy brochure for Seaview Crest. I had looked at it every day, imagining the family gatherings, the holidays, the laughter that would fill those high-ceilinged rooms. I had contributed $150,000 towards the down payment, liquidating stocks William and I had carefully chosen together decades ago. It wasn't a loan. There was no paperwork, no talk of repayment. It was a gift, a mother's grand gesture of saying, "I believe in you. I want you to be happy." Now, it felt as though I had simply purchased my own exile. I leaned against the counter, the cold marble seeping through my dress, and whispered the question I had been too afraid to voice for years. Was any of it about love, or was it all just a series of transactions? For the first time, I didn't rush to make excuses for them. I didn't invent a stressful day at work for Julian or a misunderstanding for Camilla. I simply stood in the quiet, stark truth of the situation. I had made my support so readily available that they had forgotten it was a choice. It had become an invisible utility, as reliable and unappreciated as the water running from their taps. I didn't sleep that night. The words from the text echoed in the silence of my bedroom. "Camilla thinks it's better if it's just us." By the time the first pale light of dawn filtered through my window, painting the room in shades of lavender and gray, I knew what I had to do. There was no anger, no thirst for revenge. There was only a profound, weary clarity. I made myself a strong cup of Earl Grey tea, sat at my small kitchen table, and watched the sun rise over the water. The stack of papers from the Julian file lay beside me, a monument to a past I was about to close the door on. Then, I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Port Blossom Community Bank. "Good morning, Port Blossom Community. This is Brenda speaking. How may I help you?" "Good morning, Brenda," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "My name is Marian Thorne. I need to suspend all automatic payments and transfers from my accounts, effective immediately." There was a brief, surprised pause on the other end of the line. "All of them, Mrs. Thorne?" "Yes, every last one. And while we're at it, I would also like to begin the process of revoking the power of attorney granted to my son, Julian Thorne." I could hear the soft, rapid clicking of her keyboard. "That's a very significant change, Mrs. Thorne. For the power of attorney, you'll need to come in and sign some documents with Mr. Albright. But I can place a hold on all automated debits right now. That's what I want. Please start today." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was potent. It was the sound of shackles being unlocked. For over 20 years, I had propped up my son, his wife, their lifestyle, their ambitions, their social obligations. That morning, I remembered something else William used to say, his hand covering mine as we sat on our porch swing. "Marianne, your heart is a garden, not a public park. Be careful who you let trample the flowers." When Brenda confirmed that all 22 monthly automatic payments were now blocked, I thanked her, hung up the phone, and took a long, deep breath. The air that filled my lungs felt different, cleaner, lighter. I hadn't realized how heavy the burden of their lives had been on my own. The years of small slights, the casual dismissals, the holidays spent waiting for a call that often came late or not at all, even as I was paying for the very festivities I wasn't part of. That morning, I didn't just cancel payments, I was reclaiming my own landscape. My phone buzzed again. "Julian." I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I wouldn't be drawn into a panicked, defensive argument. Instead, I typed a simple reply to his text from the night before. I stared at the words for a long moment before pressing send. I received your message. I hope you have a lovely birthday. Then I turned the phone off, silencing the noise of their world so I could finally hear my own. By the time Julian arrived at my door 2 days later, the storm I knew was coming had made landfall. He didn't knock. He used the key I gave him years ago, striding into my hallway with the proprietary air of someone who has forgotten they are a guest. His face was a mask of anxiety and disbelief. "Mom, what in God's name is going on?" he asked, his voice tight. The mortgage payment was declined. Camilla's car payment bounced. The club called about the membership dues. The bank sent an alert about suspended authorizations. Did you cancel everything?" I was in the sitting room, arranging a bouquet of hydrangeas from my garden. I placed a final stem in the vase before turning to face him. I nodded. "Yes, Julian." I did. He stared at me as if I had sprouted a second head. "All of it? The 22 payments?" "Mom, why?" He sank into William's old leather armchair, the one he'd always avoided because it was too worn, too old-fashioned. Today, it seemed to swallow him whole. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list my grievances. I just looked at my son, the man I had raised, and stated the simple, unadorned truth. "You sent me a text message on my birthday, Julian, telling me I wasn't welcome in your home. The home I helped you buy. You said your wife didn't want me there, and you let her." It was a mistake," he stammered, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. Camilla was stressed. "We had an argument. I didn't mean for it to come out like that." "Did you not mean to send the text, or did you not mean for there to be a consequence?" I asked quietly. He had the decency to look away, his gaze falling to the worn floral pattern on the rug. I went to the kitchen and returned with 2 cups and my silver teapot. I poured the steaming, fragrant tea into the delicate china cups my mother had left me. I placed one on the small table beside him. He made no move to touch it. "We have bills, Mom," he said finally, his voice pleading. "Major bills. The mortgage on Seaview Crust is enormous. Noah's university fees, the loans. You've always helped us." "I have," I agreed softly. "But that help was meant to be a bridge, not a permanent foundation. Over the years, that bridge became a road, and everyone just got used to driving on it. The help became expected, and then it became invisible." Julian opened his mouth to argue, to defend, but I held up a hand, a gesture that stopped him cold. "Tell me something, Julian," I said, my voice gentle but unwavering. "In the last year, can you name one thing you've done for me? One single thing that you did not because you had to, or because it was attached to a request, but simply because you wanted to? One visit that wasn't a prelude to a problem you needed me to solve." He sat there, in the heavy silence of my sitting room, the untouched cup of tea growing cold beside him. He searched his memory, his brow furrowed in concentration. And in the long, stretching silence that followed, I found my answer. And I think, for the first time, so did he. It was Noah, my grandson, who appeared next. He showed up a few days later, looking like a ship that had lost its rudder. His clothes were wrinkled, there were dark smudges of exhaustion under his eyes, and he carried with him the frantic energy of someone whose safety net had just been unceremoniously yanked away. I let him in, leading him to the sitting room. He collapsed onto the sofa with a dramatic sigh. "Graham, I'm in serious trouble," he began, twisting his hands together. "My credit card got declined. I can't pay my rent, it's due tomorrow. My car insurance payment is overdue. They're going to cancel my policy." I sat opposite him, my posture calm, my hands resting in my lap. I had steeled myself for this. "How much do you owe, Noah?" He hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, landing on everything but me. "On the card, about $9,000. My eyebrows rose slightly, but my expression remained neutral. "What did you spend $9,000 on?" He shrugged, a gesture of feigned nonchalance that didn't quite land. You know, stuff. A new gaming system, that ski trip with my buddies to Whistler, concert tickets. I was going to pay it down. I nodded slowly, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. You've had that part-time job at the marina for over a year now, haven't you? Yeah, but it barely covers my gas and, well, going out. So you've never learned to live within your means? I asked, not as an accusation, but as a genuine question. He looked like a small boy again, caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I don't know. I guess I always knew if I got into a real jam, Mom and Dad would help. Or you would. And that, my dear boy, is the very heart of the problem, I said gently. You have all been living with the assumption that I am a perpetual resource. I am not your backup plan, Noah. I am not an institution. I am your grandmother. He leaned forward, his casual demeanor cracking to reveal the raw desperation beneath. Graham, please. I'm begging you. Just this once. I swear on my life, I'll get it together. I'll pay you back every cent. The old Marianne would have opened her checkbook. The old Marianne would have sighed, given a lecture, and then given the money. The old Marianne would have rescued him. But the old Marianne was gone. No, I said. The word was soft, but it was made of steel. I will not give you the money. But I will offer you something else. He looked up, confused. What else is there? My lawyer, Mr. Albright, is an old friend. His firm is looking for a part-time administrative assistant. It's filing, answering phones, making copies. It's not glamorous, and it won't pay $9,000 overnight, but it's a steady, respectable job with consistent hours. It's a start. Noah stared at me, blinking. You'd set that up for me? I love you, Noah, I said, my voice thick with an emotion I hadn't allowed myself to show him in years. But I am done enabling you. My love is no longer going to be measured in dollars and cents. It's time you learn to build something for yourself. He sat back, the fight draining out of him. He was quiet for a long time, the reality of his situation settling in. For the first time in his 21 years, he had been offered a hand up instead of a handout. For the first time, he heard the word no not as a punishment, but as an act of profound, challenging love. Real love, I was learning, doesn't always feel comfortable. Sometimes, it sounds a lot like a boundary. That evening, as the sun began its slow descent, casting long, golden shadows across my lawn, there was a soft knock on my front door. It was Sophie. In her arms was a paper bag filled with groceries, and on her face was a look of quiet concern. She hadn't come to plead for her parents or her brother. She hadn't come for money. She had simply come to see me. Grandma, she said, her voice a soothing balm as I ushered her inside. I saw Dad yesterday. He looks shattered. Mom is a walking thundercloud, and Noah is moping in his room like the world has ended. The house feels like a war zone. I didn't reply immediately. We went to the kitchen, and in a comfortable, familiar silence, we unpacked the groceries together. She had brought fresh pasta, a jar of pesto, a loaf of crusty bread, and a small block of Parmesan cheese. While I put a pot of water on to boil, she began to grate the cheese. After a few minutes of companionable activity, she asked the question that was really on her mind. Are you okay? I stopped what I was doing and looked at my granddaughter, truly looked at her. Sophie had always been the quiet one, the observer in a family of performers. She had William's thoughtful eyes and his gentle spirit. She never asked for things, only for time. She called on my birthdays just to sing to me. She visited without an agenda, bringing a book she thought I'd like or a story about her art history class. Her hugs always lingered, as if she were trying to impart some of her own strength to me. I am okay, I said, and the truth of it surprised me. For the first time in a very, very long time, Sophie, I think I'm actually, truly okay. A slow, beautiful smile spread across her face. Good, she said. Because I think you're doing the right thing. The brave thing. I raised an eyebrow. You do? She nodded, her expression serious. I've seen it for years. How we have used you. Especially Mom. She critiques your curtains while wearing a coat you paid for. She talks about the importance of independence while driving a car you're making payments on. It was startling to hear such a blunt assessment from her, but she was a young woman now, with a clarity her parents lacked. You've taken care of everyone else for as long as I can remember, Sophie added, her voice soft. It's about time someone started taking care of you. We sat down at my small kitchen table and ate the simple dinner she had brought. There was no tension, no unspoken agenda, just warm pasta and even warmer conversation. It was the first family meal I'd had in years that felt like it was about connection, not transaction. Before she left, she wrapped her arms around me in one of her signature, lingering hugs. I'll always be here for you, Grandma, she whispered into my hair. Not for your money, just for you. I kissed her cheek, my own eyes suddenly damp. That's all I ever wanted. In a house that had so often echoed with demands and expectations, Sophie's presence was a quiet gift. It was a reminder of what family was supposed to feel like, safe, sincere, and unconditional. The next day, Julian called again. Mom, we need to talk. All of us. As a family. His voice was strained, the words carefully chosen. I could almost hear Camilla coaching him in the background. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. My house. Just the four of you. But of course, it was never going to be that simple. At 2 o'clock precisely, Julian's car pulled up. He got out, looking even more haggard than before. He walked up the path alone. Mom, he said as I opened the door. I wanted to get here first, to talk to you before everyone else arrives. Everyone else? I asked, a sense of dread pulling in my stomach. He hesitated, unable to meet my eyes. Camilla, she thought it would be a good idea to have some support. She invited her parents. And her sister. As if on cue, 2 more cars pulled into my quiet, narrow drive. Out stepped Camilla, dressed in a sharp, cream-colored pantsuit, looking more like a CEO arriving for a hostile takeover than a daughter-in-law visiting family. She was flanked by her parents, George and Helen, and her younger sister, Vanessa. They arranged themselves on my front path like a delegation. I turned back to Julian, my voice dangerously quiet. You brought an audience to my home? She thinks, he began, his voice trailing off into a helpless mumble. She thinks you're being irrational, that you need to hear from other people how your actions are affecting the entire family ecosystem. The doorbell rang, a sharp, demanding chime. I took a deep breath, walked past my son, and opened the door. Camilla stood there, a practiced, concerned smile plastered on her face. Marianne, good afternoon, she said, her voice a little too loud. We were all so worried. We're here to talk this through, as a family. This is my home, Camilla, I said, my voice low but carrying a new weight. It is not a courtroom, and it is not a boardroom. And these people, I said, gesturing to her parents and sister, were not invited by me. Camilla's smile tightened at the edges. She hadn't expected this direct opposition. They are our family. They are concerned. You, Julian, Noah, and Sophie may come in, I stated, my gaze unflinching. The rest of your delegation can wait in their cars. Or they can leave. The choice is theirs. The mask of concern on Camilla's face flickered. She turned to her family, her voice a sharp whisper. Please, just wait in the car. This won't take long. Reluctantly, they retreated, casting resentful glances over their shoulders. Once the 4 of them were inside, standing awkwardly in my living room, I closed the door and turned to face them. Noah was looking at the floor. Julian looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Only Camilla seemed ready for battle. So, I said, my voice calm as I took a seat in my armchair. Who wants to begin this circus? Camilla launched into a prepared speech, her voice filled with a saccharine blend of condescension and feigned empathy. She spoke of legacy, of familial duty, of the interconnectedness of their financial lives. Your decision, Marianne, while I'm sure it feels empowering to you, has a ripple effect. It affects my parents' peace of mind, knowing we are unstable. It affects Julian's ability to support his brother, who is going through a difficult time. It affects Noah's future. I listened without interruption, my arms crossed, my expression unreadable. When she finally paused for breath, I looked directly at her. And at what point, Camilla, did I sign up to be the central bank for your entire extended family? No one answered. Deep down, they all knew. They hadn't come to mend a relationship. They had come to restore their line of credit. The silence in the room was as thick as coastal fog. After my question had settled, unanswered, Julian finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, we grew to rely on you. You were always just there. We took it for granted. We didn't think you'd ever stop. I nodded slowly. Exactly. You didn't think. You just took. I turned my gaze to Noah. When was the last time you called me, Noah, just to ask how my day was? He shuffled his feet, his face flushing. And Camilla, I said, turning back to her. Tell me one thing, one single, solitary thing you have ever done for me out of the goodness of your heart, with no expectation of anything in return. She opened her mouth, a retort ready on her lips, then closed it again. There was nothing. You see, I continued, my voice still soft, but now it held the sharp edge of a blade. What hurts more than any of it, more than the money, more than the ungratefulness, is the erasure. It's the feeling that I ceased to exist as a person in your lives and became a function, an account to be drawn from. The moment the account was closed, the phone calls became demands. Camilla's carefully constructed composure finally crumbled. Her voice hardened. This is emotional blackmail, Marianne. You're trying to manipulate us with guilt. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm finally telling you the truth. And the truth is, I have felt more alone at your fully funded family gatherings than I ever have sitting here by myself. She stood up abruptly, her face a thunderous mask. You will regret this. When you're old and truly alone, with no one to look after you, you will remember this day and regret pushing us all away. I didn't flinch at the threat. It was a hollow one. They had already pushed me away long ago, I was just finally acknowledging it. Family isn't a word you get to use as a weapon when you want something, I said softly, looking past her to my son. It's a choice you make every day. You build it with actions, with kindness, with respect, not with invoices. Julian looked up, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. What do you want from us, Mom? What do you want us to do? Apologize? Beg? No, I said, my voice gentle again. I want you to grow up. I want you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I want you to stop confusing love with dependence. And right now, I concluded, my gaze sweeping over all 3 of them, I want you to leave my house. The words were calm, but they landed with the force of a slammed door. Noah stood without a word and walked out. Camilla shot me a look of pure venom before storming after him. Julian lingered for a moment, his expression a tangled mess of shame, anger, and loss. I'll be here, I told him, if you ever want to have a real conversation. Not about money. About us. He gave a slow, defeated nod and followed his family out the door. Only Sophie, who had been silent throughout the entire exchange, remained. She came over and wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight. I'm so proud of you, Grandma, she whispered. I didn't reply. I just held on to her, my anchor in the storm. For the first time in my adult life, I had nothing left to prove and nothing left to give but my own hard-won truth. 6 months passed. 6 months of quiet, of space, of rediscovery. For the first time in more than 2 decades, I wasn't anyone's emergency contact, financial plan, or silent benefactor. I was just Marianne. I spent my mornings on the porch, a cup of tea in hand, reading the thick, dense novels I'd always meant to get to. I took long walks along the beach, letting the wind whip through my hair and the cold spray of the Atlantic kiss my cheeks. I enrolled in a watercolor class at the community center, something I had dreamed of doing for 50 years, but had never prioritized. My paintings were clumsy and amateurish, but they were mine. Sophie visited every Sunday. She never asked for a thing. She brought stories of her university classes, her friends, her fledgling attempts at romance. She was my only bridge to the rest of the family, and she was enough. From her, I learned that Julian and Camilla had sold the house at Seaview Crest. The mortgage was unsustainable without my support. They moved into a much smaller apartment in the city. Camilla, humbled and furious, had taken a full-time job at a large furniture store. Julian was working longer hours, his face permanently etched with a weary responsibility he had never known before. Noah, to my immense surprise, had kept the job at Mr. Albright's law firm. I ran into him once at the post office. He looked different, thinner perhaps, but his eyes were clearer. He carried himself with a new, quiet dignity. He met my gaze and gave me a small, respectful nod. "Mrs. Thorne," he said. Not Graham. It was a start. And me? I went to Italy. It had been William's dream, a trip to the Amalfi Coast we had postponed for children, for mortgages, for life. We had always said one day, but one day never came for him. "Go, Grandma," Sophie had urged, helping me book the tickets online. "Do it for yourself. For him. For once, just for you." So I did. I packed a single suitcase and flew across the world. Now I am sitting on a sun-drenched terrace in Positano, overlooking a sea so blue it hurts the eyes. My oldest friend, Beatrice, sits beside me, sketching the vibrant cascade of bougainvillea that spills over the wall. The air is thick with the scent of lemons and jasmine. "You look lighter, Marianne," Beatrice says, not looking up from her sketchbook. "Like you've set down something heavy." "I have," I reply, a small smile playing on my lips. I finally laid down the weight of other people's expectations. And in doing so, I had found the one thing I had been searching for all along, a profound and lasting peace. Not just the absence of conflict, but the deep, resonant presence of self. The quiet, unshakable strength of a woman who no longer needed to be needed in order to feel whole. That evening, as twilight bleeds across the sky in strokes of incandescent orange and deep violet, my phone, resting on the table, buzzes. Julian's name illuminates the screen. 6 months ago, my heart would have leaped. I would have answered before the first ring was complete, my mind already racing, preparing to soothe, to fix, to help. But the woman who would have done that is gone. I look at the screen, at the name of the son I will always love, and I let the call go to voicemail. I do not need another hollow promise, another tentative negotiation. I will not be pulled back into the orbit of a world I fought so hard to escape. Instead, I pick up my glass of chilled Pinot Grigio, raise it to the breathtaking horizon, and make a silent toast. To me. To the woman who spent a lifetime putting herself last, who smiled through lonely birthdays, who paid for lives she wasn't invited to share and called it love. She is a ghost now, a memory. In her place is a woman who has learned that true freedom isn't about letting go of people. It's about letting go of the need for their permission to be happy. I do not owe anyone an explanation for choosing my own peace. Later that night, a message from Sophie arrives. It's a photo of a small, sunny room with freshly painted blue walls and a simple bed with a handmade quilt. The caption reads, "The guest room in my new apartment is officially ready. Can't wait for you to visit, Grandma. It's just yours. Always." A tear slips down my cheek, but it is not a tear of sorrow. I smile because I finally understand that the greatest legacy we can leave isn't the money we give or the properties we help buy. It's the truth we finally find the courage to speak, and the boundaries we draw to protect our own soul. It's learning that a single, heartfelt welcome is worth more than 1,000 hollow invitations.